Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Roundup. I'm about to start work on another monitor shootout video, and I really would love to know what questions you all want answered in the video, because while I want to answer my own questions, I also want to tailor it to all of you. So it's going to be a follow-up to the OLED shootout, and that video was basically 1440p versus 4K and how you use it with retro and then how you use the extra refresh rates. However, this one is going to be two 27-inch monitors. Each are exactly 240 hertz, but one is a high-end LCD and the other one is an OLED. So that way it really is going to be like an OLED versus LCD shootout, with the context being, what if you need a monitor for stuff like I do, just mostly desktop use, but you also want to do gaming on it, both modern and retro. So would OLED still be the best choice? Would it not? And I would love to hear what questions you all want answered. All of the stuff that's going to be in the other video, I'll touch upon it, or that was in the other video, I'll touch upon again, so no need to bring any of that up. But if there's anything you felt like I missed or anything specifically you want to hear, please just let me know right here in these comments, and I'll make sure to try my best to add it. And this probably isn't going to be some crazy half-hour long video, but at the very least, it's going to hopefully answer the questions. Also, if any of you would like to buy any of those monitors when I'm done with them, please let me know, because I bought both and I don't want to return either of them, and I don't know if either are going to be a fit for my setup, so I hate taking risks like that. So if that's something any of you are interested in, please hit me up and we could try to work something out. But anyway, let's jump in and see what we got. First up, the Sega guys have released two videos on comparing the original Master System Sonic the Hedgehog games versus the Game Gear version. And this one really blew my mind because I had the Game Gear version as a kid and I don't think I beat it. Maybe I finally did with a Game Genie or something like that. But when I eventually got back into retro and I got the Master System version, I was blown away. Like, it's basically the same exact game, but you get the bigger screen space. But in all honesty, I never really played past the second or third level of the Master System version. I don't know why, it just didn't really catch my interest as much as the 16 bits, certainly later on in life. And I never realized that past the second, third level, something like that, they're different games. It's based on the same thing. It's clearly the same team, just rearranging things with the Game Gear, but it was really, really interesting to see. So while this video probably isn't going to change anybody's life, I was glued to it the whole time because I really just didn't know any of that stuff. And it almost feels like they took the Game Gear version and said, okay, well, there's a tiny screen that you could barely see, and kids are probably going to be playing it, probably younger than kids playing the console version, so let's make it a little easier towards the end or something like that. I don't mean to spoil the videos here, because obviously just me explaining it doesn't do it justice. You got to watch the Sega guys video on it. So I did have my thoughts that are totally spoilers here in the post, so don't read the post until after the video, I guess. And also the video on the, well, spoilers here, but Sonic 2 is basically the same game, but I still really enjoyed the video on it, so I strongly recommend watching both. Also, my apologies to the Sega guys. I watched this video when it came out and loved it, and then completely forgot to write a post about it, and it wasn't until the Sonic 2 video came out the other day that I thought, oh crap, actually, I think I thought, oh, I'll just bounce off the other post I already wrote, and then I realized, oh crap, I never wrote the other post. What a moron. So my apologies to the Sega guys. They're both worth watching, but the first one, anybody who's played both of those games before, you got to see this, because I think you'd be pretty interested in seeing the differences, and let me know which version you'd rather play. I've been borrowing the new Arcooda 26-inch 1440 by 1080 LCD-based 4x3 arcade monitor replacement, and I did the first of what's going to be at least 2 live streams on it. And I wanted to give a quick summary here, but please stick with me for just another minute because I want to make sure I get the most important part right. And then if you don't really care about this, just skip to the next section. But even if you really don't, please stick around because I want to try to clear up some confusion. The biggest thing about this monitor is you need to think about the context in which it was designed, because it is very expensive until you think about the total picture. So these monitors were designed to be in a situation where your arcade CRT dies and you can't easily get a replacement, so you need one for maybe it's a permanent solution, maybe it's a short term, but you need a solution now. So you pick up one of these things, you remove the chassis and CRT, you bolt this in its place. It comes with some mounting rails that should be adaptable to, as long as you're close to the original size, it should fit. And then an extra $15 board bolts to the back of this thing and accepts RGBS that came right off of your CRT's chassis. And that's it. Yes, it's $500, but you don't need a super gun. You don't need a scaler. You don't need to rewire your arcade machine's control panel to work with a super gun instead of just using the JAMA wiring harness, because you don't need to change anything. You're just using the same 4 wires that you would have used for the main chassis to this one. You don't need to find a 16:9 monitor and build a custom bezel to mount it, hoping it all fits. You don't need to try and hunt down some weird old Dell 4x3 that may or may not be in decent working condition. So if you put all of that stuff into context, the $500 plus $15 adapter plus $10 for the extension for the monitor controls, that actually saves you money over all of the other choices. But if you asked me, well, what if I just want a cheap LCD gaming monitor? No, go get that sub $200 one that I reviewed a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was just over 200 or something like that. Grab that and an OSSC and you're fine to start out with, or just a Mister or something like that. But in the context in which this was designed, it's a great value and it performs well. So there were a lot of people that jumped in after the stream and just refused to listen to the context and just lost their minds over $500 without considering any of those other things. So that's it. If you don't care about this, just skip to the next section. I do want to continue with the mini review, but I just wanted everybody to know that, because it's totally okay to think this isn't for me, or it's a lot of money, I'll look into other solutions and see what I could do. But no one's getting ripped off. It's a decent value. But I guess let me just start out by talking about what I already touched upon. Feeding standard 15 kilohertz RGBS into this thing works totally fine. It is not as good as a RetroTink 4K, but it's better than any LCD monitor I've ever seen. Turning sharpness up to 4 does an excellent job, and that's even considering that 1080 height is not an integer of 240. So to fill the screen, you do have a slightly mismatched scale, and it still looks fine. It needs TTL sync, so from your arcade machine, that's fine. If you're using like a RetroTink dongle, that's totally fine. You know, like the new RGB RetroTink ones, or output of a Mister, if, for whatever reason, if you wanted the analog output of a Mister, that's all totally fine. You just want to hit the auto button on the remote or in the menu or whatever else, and it should automatically get everything working. Now, compatibility was great on the analog inputs. I did run into a few things, and Arcooda got back to me immediately and said, for a bunch of different arcade boards, the timings are so far off that you got to just hit the auto button a bunch of times, and it should eventually catch on to it. If it doesn't, please send them an email with their arcade board and pictures and information, and they'll see if they can get an update to the menu to fix it. But generally speaking, it did a pretty darn good job syncing on things that most other things wouldn't. So that's absolutely something to note. As for lag, if you're sending it close to its native resolution of 1440 by 1080, so even sending it, 720p-esque type of things, the latency is a solid 1.4 milliseconds, which is really, really fast for a flat panel, especially at 60 hertz. If you're sending it analog video, excuse me, it's a rolling frame of lag. So it's exactly what you would expect from a modern scaler, but since it's built in, it's basically between 1.4 milliseconds in a frame, constantly rolling back. So for the most part, it's fine in most arcade environments. Most pro players cannot detect anything under a frame. So at that point, it's 50-50 that in the most intense scenarios, maybe you might notice, but generally speaking, those are pretty good, especially in a bright environment and, with no other latency involved. It's not like you have software lag in this too if you're going into an arcade machine. So I thought that was pretty good. If you want to connect a Mister or even a RetroTink 4K, you just would need custom modes for both of them. You just copy and paste what I have here, and it works totally fine. Just remember that 1080 is not an integer. So if you're using something like the Mister, you can't use the auto crop function that scales over the height of 1080p. I asked on the, I asked about that, and Sorg just basically said that's not really how that feature works. It's not like you're just cutting off a little bit on the sides. The way the actual function works in Mister, it's just not going to work like that. You need the widescreen resolution, because anybody might be thinking, well, that's about the same as normal CRT overscan on all four sides anyway. What's the big deal? According to Sorg, I got the impression it had to do with the way the Mister scaling worked, but it still looks fine. You could stretch it to the full screen. You could use it in V integer mode, and you have black bars on all sides, but scan lines would look perfect. On the RetroTink 4K, you could do whatever you want, because you could just set your custom mode line, scale it however you want. I thought it looked absolutely awesome in 5X mode that way, but to each their own. Unfortunately, though, you can't send it 16:9 resolutions. I talked to Arcooda, and they said because of the native resolution of the panel, that stuff wasn't included in any of the code. So it would have been very nice to be able to send it 1080p normal, so 1920 by 1080, and have it say just crop out the sides and show the middle. And because that would have been perfect for use with all of the other scalers out there. And yeah, you could kind of tweak the OSSC and the RetroTink 5X to scan past it. It is a pain. It's not as easy as the rest. So yeah, the lack of aspect control was kind of a bummer for people that wanted to use this with modern stuff. Even like plugging once again, I don't know if you'd want to drop this much money to plug like a retro emulation console in it, like the NES Classic or the Genesis Mini or something like that. But you couldn't do that now anyway. I guess you could with as long as the whatever the source is has a 16:9 stretch option. That would actually be the perfect scenario for it, because this monitor could probably squish it back in. But you basically you'd have to tinker. You can't do it on the monitor itself. Moving along, brightness was excellent, and I actually had to keep the brightness down most of the time unless I was using CRT mask emulation. And when I turned it up to 100%, even with CRT mask emulation, it was still really bright. It wasn't as bright as HDR, but really close. And if you are using a device that supports HDR, you have to manually turn it on in the menu. I could understand why they left it as off by default, just to stop any confusion from or mistakes. But I set it to auto, and it never failed on me. So that's just something to remember. And then it worked great. Shout out to whoever was in the live stream chat that reminded me of that. Also, after enabling HDR mode, you get different options in the picture menu. Dark Enhance didn't seem to do much in the game that I was testing, but try it out. But Sharp Enhance made the RetroTink 4K CRT mask emulation absolutely pop out. I was very impressed at how all of that stuff looked. But that's probably going to be a game or a per game case by case basis. So basically, if you're feeding this thing an HDR source, try those features and see if it looks good to you. It's already built in, so you might as well. One thing I missed in the stream that I will be touching upon in the follow-up stream, the Windows shows the native resolution properly as 1440 by 1080, but it accepts as high as 75 hertz and as low as 24. So, I mean, I'm not sure how it would look watching a 24 hertz movie on this thing, but I'll try it out next time. But accepting 72 hertz means DOS works. It's going to work fine. So I'll definitely try that in the follow-up. That was really cool. The menu or the version I had an issue with the menu where it locked up if you tried to mess with two certain modes, but they're actually going to be sending me a different menu board to replace this thing with. Excuse me. So the follow-up stream should really dig into the settings that didn't work. Also, on the remotes, the $10 optional remote is a really nice option. It's not the world's best remote. It's a cheap thing, but I love that I don't have to fiddle with buttons on the back of a monitor. I can just use a wired or a wireless remote. The only one downside is the exit button of the remote also triggers auto calibration for auto mode or for analog mode. So that kind of was annoying, but a small complaint. There was also the $12 wired remote extender board and cable. So that's what I was talking about before for anybody with arcade machines. It's a great thing to purchase. So I got a follow-up stream coming where I'm going to test the new board. I'm going to test Dreamcast on it because my GDMU died. So I guess I gotta figure out, maybe I'll get another replacement, or I don't know. I'll have to figure that out. Anybody got a used mode or a beat up GDMU, let me know and I'll try to pick that up. So I'll definitely do those, and I will test anything else that you all want me to test that I have the equipment to. There are a lot of requests to test odd arcade boards that there's no way I could do that. But yeah, overall, I really liked it. I thought in the correct context, it was great. I also been talking to a buddy who wants to use this to build a custom home arcade machine out of an LCD panel and a mister. So I think that might be where this goes next. But yeah, and just one other polite note, I am borrowing this and hopefully the 4K version from Arcooda as well. I am not being paid to review it. I'm not getting anything for free. I paid for the stand for this thing with my own money, and so far I paid for the tariffs with my own money too. So there were a bunch of people that were convinced that I was giving this a good review because I wanted a free one. I do not own this one. This will be moved on. Both of these will be moved on to the next person as soon as I'm done reviewing it. And I'm going to continue to borrow as much equipment as I can because I just can't afford to buy all this stuff. No, nobody could. So that's the whole overview. Sorry it took so long. I just wanted to make sure to get everything out there. But that was way shorter than that long live stream I did. So feel free to watch the stream if you'd like. But I think what I just said was way more clear. Next is something really exciting for any fellow retro old folk or people who are just really into awesome retro history. But the legendary Zophar just did an interview with the legendary ZS Knight, the creator of ZSNES. One of the first things that you learn in this interview is that they're Canadian, so it's actually ZS Knight and ZSNES. So honestly, this was one of those things where it was just so cool to hear from this dev, from an absolutely groundbreaking emulator for its time. There were so many cool things. I loved hearing the behind the scenes stuff. The same creator also has a brand new retro inspired game out, so definitely check that out if you're into it too. But this was just a very, very cool interview, and I'm so glad I got to listen to it. I was paying attention the whole time, and I couldn't think of a better person to do this interview than Zophar. So I don't want to spoil anything else because it was just a great interview with a very likable person who did some very cool stuff that, anybody in the scene knows, obviously, what ZSNES is. So definitely give this one a try. Also, if you want to hear more from Zophar, I did an interview with him a while back, but honestly, the focus now is on ZS Knight. No disrespect to Zophar, obviously. I'm sure he agrees. He wants people to watch this video and hear from this dev. So definitely check this one out. This was very cool, and I really enjoyed all of no spoilers, just I enjoyed the behind the scenes stories and the whole demeanor of the whole thing. So definitely watch that one if you're into this stuff. I just reviewed a 4x1 HDMI switch that works with Mr. Direct Video, SNES via the OSSC in 5X mode, Mr's low latency mode, the RetroTink 4K, and a bunch of other scenarios. So this is definitely something that, while it's not some super crazy switch, it's below $40 shipped, and it's really good for both modern and retro. So let me dig into it. If you don't care about HDMI switches, just switch to the next section, I guess. The one downside, it is not compatible with PlayStation 3, which is my coy way of saying it doesn't strip HDCP. In these shorter reviews I do, I always try not to get in trouble. I don't know. I'm just trying to cover my own butt here, but that means it's not going to strip HDCP, so you can't use PS3 at all. That's the PS3's fault. And you can't do like streaming boxes through it into the RetroTink 4K or a capture card or anything like that. However, I want to go over the rest of the stuff. First, as far as modern, it could handle up to 8K 60, all of the audio formats, all the video formats. I tested it for pretty long periods of time with 4K up to 144, I think, but also, 4K 24, Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos, all that stuff was fine. There were 0 dropouts, which is very rare for single output HDMI devices, but I have seen some crappy HDMI devices that drop signal for no reason, even with one output. This did not. That was pretty solid. It will support the highest 48 gigabit per second bandwidth, not 40, but 48, as long as you have cables rated at 48 as well. I forgot to mention that in the video review, but that will do that. All the ports are in back, which is nice for a nice clean look. I've seen a bunch of switches with ports all over them on both sides, and it just looks like a weird science project. Powered by USB-C, and while it does come with an AC adapter and cord, I also just powered it off of every USB device I had, basically my PC, whatever else. It has an auto mode and a manual mode, and both worked well, but just remember that if you leave it in auto mode and you're watching TV and you power something else on for whatever reason, it'll auto switch to that. So I usually just leave all of my switches in manual mode. The button on the back can switch between inputs, but also the remote could go directly to it, and you could switch to an input that's off, which is not something that happens too often, but sometimes you just want to get all your stuff set up, and I've seen lots of switches that just don't do that for whatever reason. Moving on with this, CEC, Consumer Electronics Control. I only tested power off commands, but they should all be through the same CEC, and it did work. It worked with two Apple TV boxes on two different TVs that did not turn off the TV with many other switches that I've tested. So at the very least, this will power your equipment on and off along with it, which is good to know. I had an issue with, excuse me, the port number 4 was labeled ARC, and I didn't quite get it. And shout out to the comment section. Someone, Pro Nerdy, I believe, clarified this, so thank you. According to one of the Q&As that the company had responded, they said if your smart TV and external stereo both support ARC, you can use the in-4 ARC port to send audio from ARC-enabled TV apps like Netflix to the stereo. However, ARC cannot be used when you use input devices. So the scenario I tested, where you have your Apple TV box going into this switch and port 4 going to the ARC input of your stereo and then output to your TV, that will not work. This is essentially for if your TV's apps, if you want to send it out that way and you also have your amp connected to port 4, that supposedly would work. So that's cool. That's good to know. And I'm sorry I messed that up. I'm not sure how common a scenario that is, but it's good to clarify it. Yeah, and that's basically it. So the fact that it's compatible with MR in its lowest latency mode, including direct video mode, and compatible with the RetroTink 4K's inputs, besides the whole no HDCP stripping thing, of course. This is a really awesome switch for modern and retro. And the way I found out about it was a couple of people had reached out, including some awesome supporters for the weekly Q&A, to say that they had the same brand, Roofle, and they've had switches for 10 years that are still working. So obviously, I can't guarantee anything like that, but it's just nice to know this isn't one of those brands that appeared 3 days ago and it's going to be gone in a month. So yeah, if you want a sub $40 switch delivered to you, that is, on the one hand, nothing special, 4 in, 1 out, but on the other hand, checks all those boxes, it was thoroughly vetted, then here you go. Here's your mini review of it. You could check out the video, but it basically was just visual examples of everything I said, missing all the corrections after the fact. So yeah, check that one out if you're into it, and I'm glad to find some sort of cheap, reliable HDMI switch to recommend. By the way, if you want this one, let me know. I bought it just because I needed to start testing HDMI devices, but I can't have a stack of HDMI switches on my shelf. So if anybody wants to buy this, it's got 10 hours worth of use on it, and it was thoroughly vetted, so you get a working one. But please let me know in the comments. Now it's time for this week's Mr. Updates, care of Lou from Lou's Retro Source. As usual, if you want to see visual examples, a lot more details, and Lou going on a nice nature walk, check out Lou's video. But I'm just going to skim this and give my thoughts where I feel like. First up, new updates have been implemented to both the Saturn and STV cores. So if you're using both of those, definitely try it and see if anything was that you were having troubles with might have been fixed. Next, there's an interview posted with the Ipsilon, the creator of the downloader script in Update All. I have not had a chance to listen to it yet. I will soon, but I'm obviously a giant fan of their work, and I'm happy to support on Patreon because I believe Lou even said it's very easy to get spoiled with this stuff because you're just used to clicking on Update All. I certainly am, at least, and it's easy to forget how much more complicated it would be to get all of this stuff without it. So can't wait to listen to that one. And speaking of which, Update All version 2.4 has been released, and this has a bunch of optimizations, and you also need to update your Patreon key if you want the Patreon features, but they're not things that you need. Obviously, I'm happy to support the Epsilon on Patreon, but this isn't one of those things where you're going to miss some giant feature that everybody needs without it. It's just some bonus fun as just a thank you for supporting. So do it or don't. Maybe you still support on Patreon, but don't bother because Update All already does everything you need. That's totally cool too. Some updates to Turtles in Time from both teams that are working on it. The Coin Op Collection updated their core, and Hotego also released an alternate Turtles in Time core. So did anybody do a shootout of those yet? Is there an advantage to one or the other? Is there like a third team of FPGA devs that want to take a look at both and kind of, see the different ways they went about doing it? I haven't played either yet, but I'd like to. I like all the Turtles games except the NES one. But, but yeah, I don't know. I'd love to know more info on that. Coin Op Collection also mentioned they're going to be resuming work on G.I. Joe since they're happy with the accuracy of the Turtles in Time core. Developer Alexander Meha, haven't seen Alex since PRGE a couple years, many years, 6 years ago now. Oh, time flies. But Alex is working on an app that lets you use voice commands via ChatGPT to launch games on your Mister. I love nerdy stuff like that. I don't ever want to talk to my TV to turn on a Mister, but I love where his head's at, and I bet you people much smarter than me could figure out even cooler ways of getting that working. So check it out if you're interested. Taki talked about selling cheap PlayStation 1 and 2 memory cards that are based on the open source SD to PSX design. And I think that is an excellent idea because, first of all, it's open source, so anybody could make them, which means companies like Bitfunks could make them and they would be legitimately doing it. But I don't want to support companies that steal. I want to support companies that don't. So I'm glad to see Taki tease those and hopefully be able to make those. I think Taki said it was about $10. So that would be really cool because you could use those on the Superstation or just an original PlayStation. So it'd be cool to see that one get released. Also, SRG320 posted a video showing the FMV capabilities of the in-development 3DO core. There's no release yet, but it looks very cool, and SRG320 is just a total badass for working on all of this stuff. So it'd be very cool to see that when it's released. Mr. Organize had an October update that brought The Mr. Organized project had an October update that brought additions catered to light gun games that offer regular or Ascendant light gun setups for all regions, as well as a bunch of other cool little things. I still would love to see that somehow applied as a RetroNAS plugin. If you're on the Mr. Organized team, please reach out to me in the comments, my email, however else. I just would love to see that happen. Also, Hotego released an MRA that allows you to play the arcade game Clockwork Aquario, which was a platform arcade game that was canceled before release. So that's pretty cool. The game was eventually released on modern consoles, but it's nice to have the original arcade version. Also, Hotego added the Where's Waldo game to the System 18 core. I think there's Japanese and US versions of that. And lastly, XOLOD79, Solid 79. I'm sorry, I'm really terrible at this. I don't mean to mispronounce everybody's names, but they posted a test build of the 486 core that supports the Gravis ultrasound audio card, which is really cool. I mean, you still need to configure them the same way you would have on an old PC, but it's nice to be able to have that functionality. So, as always, thanks so much to Lou for doing these. I could never keep up with all of this stuff without him, and I'm happy to support on Patreon. But if not, just subscribe to him on YouTube because it's free and why not? Developer JN Martin 84 just posted a full port of the game Wipeout to the Sega Dreamcast, and it mostly runs at 60 frames per second. This project took basically a year and it looks so cool. There's a ton of options like a 16:9 mode, 24-bit color depth, extended draw distance, PlayStation collision behavior, a ton of awesome stuff. And this is just really cool to see. It's been really impressive seeing a lot of these other ports to the Dreamcast, but I don't know, this was always a fun game, and I haven't tried it myself yet because I still have a dead Dreamcast I got to repair, but this is definitely something that I would be interested in trying, and I just think it would be fun to see how it runs on a different platform like this. So if you want the full story on this, definitely check out Dan's post, but it was just really impressive to see and something I am excited to try out as soon as I get a working ODE on my Dreamcast again. But there's a playable CDI file available, and you could also recompile it yourself via Callistios. I never know how to say that. But yeah, check out Dan's post for all the info. Very, very cool looking. The unreleased sequel to the Virtual Boy game, Virtual League Baseball, was just acquired from a former game tester and released to everybody. Virtual League Baseball 2 is not the world's best baseball game, but there's a bunch of pretty cool things about it, including it would have been the first and probably only retail release to officially support the link cable, meaning you could link two Virtual Boys together and play two-player games quite literally head-to-head. It also has improved graphics and sound over the original, as well as save game support, but this is just one of those things that seems very cool as from a historical point of view, but also because technically we all just got a new Virtual Boy game to try out. Now, they spent, the team who was working on this spent a lot of money to get this thing, and there's a fundraiser if anybody wants to help out. They've barely recouped any of the costs. They did it just out of the love of Virtual Boy and the community. So if you love this stuff and you have the ability to, and you're in a place to, please consider dropping them a tip from the PayPal fundraiser. And if not, totally understandable. But, I always wish I was loaded. I wish I was one of those YouTubers that had a video that went super viral and I could start raking in the dough and start throwing cash towards all these awesome projects. But it is what it is. Also, there's a couple of quick things to note. The team, with the help of Thunderstruck, prepared both save files and patches to change the game's custom team into a maxed out, unbeatable all-star ensemble featuring their names as well as others from the Virtual Boy scene. So you can get those optionally if you want. I thought that was fun. And also, this all happened a month ago. I'm usually really good at staying close to up to date with the Virtual Boy scene because I'm a fan of that console, handheld, face held, whatever you want to call it. But I totally missed the mark on this one. So my genuine apologies to Chrissy and anybody in the Virtual Boy, Planet Virtual Boy scene. Totally my bad. Feel free to reach out to me if I missed this stuff in the future. But yeah, this is cool. I'm looking forward to giving it a try. Obsolete Sony has just successfully funded a Kickstarter campaign for another book called Sony Personal Audio: A Visual Journey from 1955 to 2025. And if you follow Obsolete Sony on social media, you should know what to expect. Really great pictures and stories behind a lot of these products. And their covers more than 100 devices, including rare advertising materials, design insights, and untold stories from Sony's golden eras. The price for the book, if you want an ebook, is $15. Physical copy is $40. Both ebook and physical copies about $50, and you could even back a tier that includes digital and hardcover copies of this and their previous book, Sony Year by Year, for about $100. The campaign still has about a month left in it, so there's plenty of time to get it, even though it has already been funded. And I know I've said this a lot for different books like this, but I do think stuff like this is not only cool for people like us to flip through and read, but also an awesome coffee table book. Because if you're as much of a nerd as I am, I'm sure you also have nerd friends, and you probably have at least one of these, if not all the books I've talked about, laying on your coffee table. And I do hear from people all the time that they bought the book because they heard it here, and their fellow nerds do come over, pick it up, and go, holy crap, what's this? So this seems like the perfect one of those, and I just wanted to share it with everybody if you're into it. So links to everything are in the post, and definitely looks pretty cool. And speaking of books for our fellow nerds, a book was just released about coding for the original Game Boy using assembly. And the goal of the book is for readers to learn real systems programming, assembly language, memory management, interrupts, etc. by building games on actual Game Boy hardware. So this is definitely for people who really want the programming side of things, but also want to learn how to make Game Boy games. You could, of course, just use GB Studio and start making games without any of this knowledge, but this is obviously for a specific type of us nerds that already kind of know they want to get into this, but they want a reference guide. Now, in full disclosure, I'm nowhere near smart enough to code a Game Boy game, but I do know that whenever I'm learning something new, I want reference materials right in front of me. And while usually I have a web window open right in front of me, it often doesn't really work that way, where I need something up full screen. Flipping back and forth sometimes drives me crazy. So I'll have a tablet open or a laptop or sometimes a second screen, depending. But in this case, you could pick up a Kindle edition or the paperback edition. The book is not cheap. It's $35 for the Kindle edition and $50 for the paperback. But if you're serious about assembly Game Boy coding, then this is for you. So let me know your thoughts on this one. Like I said, I'm not a programmer, so I'm not really the best to give insight on this. But I figure just being honest, telling you all that and saying, hey, if you're a programmer and you want Game Boy stuff, what do you think? I'd love to hear if I, did a good thing sharing it, if this wasn't really something that applies to us, but it seemed like a good fit. So let me know what you think. Well, that's it for this week. I had to record these a lot earlier than normal, so if you see something on the website that I didn't get to, it's just because it was released after I had already recorded and edited this, and if that's the case, I'll just get to it in next week's roundup. So my apologies if that happens. If not, cool, I got lucky, but anyway, as always, thanks to everybody who watches, listens, plays nicely in the comments, and especially thank you to anybody who supports in any way, because it really is you who keeps all this stuff going. So thank you all so much. Let me know if you want to buy either one of those monitors and the HDMI switch, and I'll see you next week. This week's Roundup is brought to you by Neo Paradigm Entertainment, connecting Southeast Asian influencers with opportunities in the West.